Thanks for having me back. Good to see a few faces from last year. So I'm here, probably the fifth or sixth AI presentation that you've already had already, so apologies for that. I'm here to talk about kind of three things that we're seeing in marketing generally that we think AI is having an impact on and a positive disruption. So I'm just going to talk through three particular cases. Just before we start, I'm Andy Houstoun. I'm from a company called Crimtan. I'm Chief Commercial Officer. I have around about 20 years of Martech and digital experience, and actually it's changed massively. It's changed beyond recognition. So I started at Tesco.com back in 2000, and we were faxing orders down to the store, and believe it or not, we were then picking up the phone and ringing the store so that the checkout person could then take the credit card details to process the order. So I mean, that was only 20 years ago. Like fast forward now, and we're having lots of discussions around artificial intelligence and how we can positively impact the industry that we all work in. Just a bit about Crimtan. We've been around for about 14 years. We're programmatic and data solutions experts. For those of you who don't know programmatic advertising, it's built around this thing called the real-time bidding network. That's been around for about 14 years, and so over the last 14 years, we've built a technology that helps us do better planning, activation, delivery, and measurement for our client base. So, from our perspective, it's been very, very interesting. If you want to come over and talk about the general data protection regulation, I can bore the socks off you about that. If you want to talk about cookieless, we can talk about that too. I promise you I'm not a one-trick pony when it comes to just, artificial intelligence. So the first disruption, everyone's talking about ChatGPT, and I think this is probably why we are seeing, this artificial intelligence topic become more and more prevalent. So just what is this stat? Ironically, it's from Google searches, but you can see that ChatGPT was launched in May 23, and in terms of the interest, at the moment I think there are about 26 million searches per month just for that single term on Google searches, so ChatGPT. And I guess it's for really good reason, really. So it's a little bit freaky. So what's slightly freaky about it? Well, it's quite conversational. So you can sit there, you can ask it questions, so in lots of different languages, lots of different linguistics, lots of different slang. And so there is this kind of conversational ability, so it all feels, sort of quite real. I mean, from my perspective, why do I think this is a positive disruption? Well, I think Google's had it their own way in search for quite a long time. So for me, this is a positive disruption because Microsoft, I don't know whether you've tried the Bing search engine lately, go and give it a go. Obviously that's got ChatGPT 4.0 on it. And actually the way that, if you start searching in Microsoft and within Bing is actually quite engaging. So I think it's great that, it's not a complete monopoly on search and that there's, another company trying to join that party. I guess AI is a bit of a catch-all term. So artificial intelligence, like that term originally, was around a concept of mimicking human behavior. But really a lot of what people are talking about or what they're doing within artificial intelligence is really in two different areas. So artificial intelligence is this kind of umbrella term, but what is happening within marketing is more around machine learning and deep learning. So in terms of ChatGPT for context is actually a deep learning algorithm. So the reason why everyone says, it's AI and all that sort of stuff is because everyone's adopted AI as this kind of umbrella term. But actually what it's doing is it's using a neural network of programming to try and give that conversational ability and ultimately make you feel as though you could be talking to someone. So I guess in all the positive disruption that I'm talking about today, it's more about positive disruption in deep learning and machine learning rather than the mimic of human behavior. You can't talk about AI without talking about whether or not people are worried about AI. So I think you can see when ChatGPT came out last year, Italy banned it. So why did they do that? I think there's concerns about privacy. concerns about security, and I think there's this fine balance now about public IP and private IP. So clearly ChatGPT is an open framework. Anything you put into something like ChatGPT is within public, and so therefore, I think a lot of people were kind of falling foul, asking specific confidential questions to ChatGPT, and obviously those confidential questions are being pumped into the ether of public knowledge. But, and this is what we believe, is that it's only as good as what you give it. And so there is this whole idea of open AI, which is very much where ChatGPT sits, and closed AI, which is programming it for specific functions within your organization to try and drive better efficiency. And I guess from my perspective, with this in mind, I very much enjoyed sitting down and listening to the sustainability conversation from the previous fireside chats. We're obviously very interested in looking at how we can be more efficient. So I just wanted to run through a quick use case of using AI. Now, this could be a bit of a misconception because I think a lot of people think that artificial intelligence uses a lot of processing power. I think it's fair to say that when you first train an AI system, there is a lot of processing required to do that. But ultimately, once you've gone through that kind of process, it drives much greater efficiency and less processing. So again, just trying to dispel that bit of a misnomer. But from our perspective, we work in an ads buying network. So here is a pretty typical flow. So you've got the ad placements over here, you've got the advertisers over here, you've got the real-time bidding network within the middle. And what's happening there is that every single time digital properties have an ad inventory slot, and that can happen down to second-by-second basis, you are getting requests going into the advertisers on whether or not they want to fulfill that digital slot. So the ad placement becomes available. It goes through something called a supply-side network. It then goes to a demand-side platform which receives all those bids. And then the ad placement is processed. If we're interested in the ad, we'll submit that response. And then hopefully then the ad will be delivered out. Now, the problem with this is that in order to decide whether or not we want the ads, most systems will check it against a number of parameters. So in our case, we check it around 150. And then what we'll do is based on the 150 parameters on average, we respond to 1 in 5,000. Now that's quite an inefficient kind of process. So how can we potentially use AI to improve it? So at the moment, we are trying to process everything, but actually the relevancy of what we're trying to process is probably about 10%. Actually, what if we can get that relevancy up from 10% to 80%? And roughly as a system, we process around 1 million bids per second. So obviously, the more efficiency we can drive in that, the more sustainable that particular instance could be. So with AI, and again, I think this applies to, there's been a lot of chats around Martech stacks. So what I'm trying to do is kind of give like a methodology and a process of how you might want to apply this to some of the things that you're doing within your own Martech stack. But from our perspective, actually it's all about driving the right inputs. So we can make the processing loads a lot less by allowing an AI system or a machine learning system to decide whether or not we want to process that bid in the first place. So what we do is we set up some inputs, and I'm just going to quickly run through those. Ad types we want. So typically, we have a lot of different performance information across all the different campaigns that we run. What we can do is we can look at the best performance, and we can use that as an input to understand, or for the AI engine, to actually understand whether or not we want to process that bid. And there are lots of other different things that we can process against, whether it's devices, sizes, geolocations, domains, and URLs. We can also program and train it against ad types we want to win. So based on like the CPM, so that's the bid price, we can then feed in all the information about the bids that we've won historically. And then finally, we can also feed in the information about the ad types that we lose as well. And I guess the net result of this is that what we're doing is we are then choosing far more selectively the different bids that we process. And in this particular instance, by running this process across all the inventory that we run, we're saving about 40, or we're not processing, we're not using 40 kilograms of CO2 per day. So there's lots, I think, of these little savings that we can use AI for in terms of making the way in which systems work and Martech systems work more efficient. So what are the key rules? The first one is don't give AI unlimited inputs. I don't know whether all of you are old enough to remember that film Terminator. Why would you ever give an AI system the nuclear button? I mean, that's just sort of a bad idea, isn't it? So actually, interestingly, Arnie gets sent back from 2029 in that program. So we've got like 6 years to get the process right. So don't give it unlimited inputs. And don't give it too much control. Again, don't let it press the nuclear button. And don't ask it to over-optimize. So these are like common rules, I think, when you're looking at how to implement AI as a facilitation tool within your organization. And then the third one that I wanted to talk about was I just wanted to have a quick talk about measurement. So I'm sure many of you have gone through the slightly fun process of the migration over to GA4. So obviously, what's happening in the market at the moment around privacy, what's happening around tracking, so the fact that cookies are being deprecated means that, sort of actually in terms of measurement, as a marketer, it's becoming more and more difficult to understand with the privacy concerns around, using particular types of data for reporting, the fact that cookies track only on Chrome at the moment, and that's going to go away in April 2024, and then also the fact that walled gardens are sprouting up left, right, and centre. So actually trying to do a cross-channel attribution framework across some of the bigger digital media channels such as Meta and paid search and TikTok becomes very, very difficult because obviously those are quite siloed platforms. Actually, measurement is becoming more and more difficult. And I talked a lot about measurement last year, so I promise not to talk about it too much this year. But we've been looking at how we can correctly measure with consent, so based on deterministic and probabilistic signals. Again, I covered this last year, but ultimately, when it comes to using IDs, whether it's in a cookie or somewhere else, you need to make sure that you have consent. Firstly, for using the ID, personal data under general data protection regulation, and secondly, for probabilistic matching or fingerprinting or whatever you want to call it, you need consent under privacy and electronic communications regulations. So with a lot of the ways in which we do multi-touch attribution models now, actually there's a big problem because if you don't have the appropriate consent under most legislations globally, you won't be able to do the reporting, you won't be able to do the tracking, and you won't be able to do anything else like that. So one of the reasons why Google migrated from Google Analytics to GA4 is because they had to remove something called the session-based object. And just for those of you who don't know, session-based object means they were using an ID to track the session of a particular customer and a particular user. Actually, that has gone now within GA4. And as a result of that, it's very much down to the marketer to try and stitch all those different bits of the transaction together on your own. Again, I can have more than a 20-minute conversation about that as well. So I think without consent, what we're looking sort of to do more and more is around digital signal aggregation. So all of you have probably very interesting and large first-party data sets. It's about understanding changes in behavior down to geo and time, all very, very non-personal pieces of data, so not requiring consent, and then using those signals to understand the changes that you can make to ultimately improve the overall performance. So how can AI positively disrupt this? Well, the great thing about AI and machine learning and deep learning is that you can process a lot of data. So you can give it a lot of inputs, and as long as you make sure that effectively you're defining what the inputs, don't give them too many inputs, obviously, so back to the Skynet thing, but as long as you give them the right inputs, then what you can then do is you can then start to very, very accurately predict the different things and the different levers that you have available as a marketing team to ultimately change how your campaigns and how your awareness is changing on a day-to-day basis. So, we're doing at the moment something called total media attribution. And what this is just complete holistic measurement without the need for or the use of personal data and IDs. And you can get a pretty accurate picture of what's going on based on that. Now, how do you do it? So our starting point in this particular example was a very interesting paper released by Google back in 2017 called The Bayesian Methods for Media Mix Modeling with Carryover and Shape Effects. An interesting read if you're into that sort of thing, but I mean, ultimately, this is freely available. Go and have a look at it, search for it, and have a read. And what that talked about was effectively how you could use Bayesian modeling as a solution to try and understand, based on different marketing spends, the impact that would have on the conversion rate or the engagement rate in all the different locations that you're operating. And again, back to in the same way that for sustainability AI, it's very important to get the inputs right. In this particular example, as a marketeer, it's very, very interesting or very important, to get the inputs right too. So what are the type of inputs as a marketer that you will have available to actually enter into something like this? So, you might have your go-to-market strategy. So what am I planning to spend as a marketer by channel every single, sort of month for the next 12 months? I might also have some micro factors. So one of the interesting things that we do is we build keyword universes for competitors of some of our brands, and we use that as a proxy measure for brand awareness down to region. And you can get that data down to city level, right? So it's freely available through the Google API, and it's a really good way of giving a proxy measure for understanding a micro factor in a particular area, such as how powerful are your competitors. Also, you can do it a product as well. So if you've got a specific product, you can build the keyword universes around that. And then there's interesting macro factors. So, we work with a cruise line company. And as you can imagine, when COVID-19 hit and there was basically a travel ban, the number of people ordering cruises stopped completely. Now, obviously, so that's nothing to do with their marketing spend. That's to do with a macro factor such as COVID-19. But other interesting macro factors that we see tend to impact the way in which certain products and services actually perform are inflation, unemployment. So these kind of like top-level macro factors. And all this stuff is actually available. You can feed that into the model as an input and use it as one of the coefficients that help you do your measurement and your modeling. A lot of our advertisers also work in the offline space as well. So obviously Martech is a very digital-centric sort of piece, but actually like a lot of them still do a lot of TV advertising, and they supplement that with things like CTV through our platform, or they do billboard advertising and supplement it with digital out of home. Actually, what we're also able to do as a potential input is put in the reach of all the different types of offline activity that might sit within a specific geo. So, every single magazine, every single newspaper delivers reach numbers down to postcodes invariably. You can take that and you can build a matrix to understand that if I put a certain amount of marketing spend into that particular channel, I can understand potentially from a geo basis how that kind of impacts. And then finally, and this is where sort of your digital data comes in, soft conversion, digital engagement, site visits, all that sort of stuff. So all of these things can all be measured down to a geo level. So what you can then do is when you put the marketing pound in at a particular geo, you can start listening to the different impact that it might have on you. And there's obvious things like hard conversions, booking, and revenue. So what this allows you to do then is execute the marketing spend, put your big now ear to the ground with all these inputs, and then start sort of understanding based on the go-to-market plan, how much do I want to deliver this quarter, this year? Is this something that based on the predictive model that I now have, I'm going to achieve. You can focus it down into products dependent on the level of detail you go into, and you can also focus on marketing mix. So what are the combinations of channel that I need to use within a non-linear customer journey, which everyone has nowadays? It's not as simple as just a funnel. I go from A and I go to B. They're going to be, different touch points for every single one of your customers, and ultimately, sort of how this framework can then be employed for optimization. So, like the more real time you can make it using an AI engine, the better you can optimize some of your existing campaigns. And we're now feeding this back in, in real time to make sure that we're delivering the right placements and making the right decisions in the previous AI for positive disruption that I showed in that bid stream. So there's lots of interesting things, I think, like going on in this space. And if you want to talk about it more, then please, so we're just over on the left-hand side outside this particular presentation hall. But has anyone any questions?
Let's take one, yeah? We have quite a few questions, actually. We've got time for one. The number one, which specific roles within my marketing team could be optimized? Yes.
So that's a really good question. And it depends on the AI technology that you want to employ. So I think we're under the belief that it's not as easy just to swap out things straight away because, back to the two examples that I showed, a lot of how AI can actually impact positively is by making sure that you're delivering the right inputs. And ultimately, to deliver the right inputs, you need to have a human touch for that. You need to understand the elements and the things and the drivers that, sort of actually instigate change. And so whilst I think what we're seeing is that it's giving and it's freeing up time for the marketing team to do other things, actually, we're not seeing that it's a complete replacement at this point. Phew.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
Cheers.